organizer and writer Shaun King.
Hello. So good to see each and every one of you here. I'm glad to be here. Linda and I drove up together from Brooklyn, and now I'm just hoping that it doesn't snow so we can still get home to Brooklyn later tonight. I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be able to support the BDS movement. And in so many ways, boycotts come out of the black struggle for civil rights, at least for me. And I want to share a story, really my origin story as an organizer, even share some points of some mistakes that I've made as an organizer, but then share the lessons that I've learned, because I'm hoping that my contribution here tonight is for you to be able to help us organize this movement in deep ways. About 5 years ago, I was not organizing for social justice. I had been an organizer when I was an undergrad in college. I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta. I was student government president there in 1999 when the NYPD shot and killed a young brother named Amadou Diallo 41 times on the doorstep of his home. We didn't have Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. There was no YouTube. And so it was almost 10 days after Amadou had been shot and killed before the news even got to us on campus. And we organized protests and demonstrations. 7 years later, there was a young man, again in New York, named Shaun Bell, who was shot 50 times just hours before he was to be married, on his wedding day. We organized and protested for Shaun Bell. But 7 years after that, in 2014, I was actually working at an environmental charity called Global Green, and my family and I had moved from Atlanta to Southern California, and I was the director of communications for that charity. And many of my friends from Morehouse who knew me really as Shaun the activist, as Shaun who organized against mass incarceration and police brutality, sent me a YouTube video, and at that time, it had not gone viral. We didn't know the man's name in the video, but he sent me a YouTube video via a Facebook message. And he said, Shaun, there's a video that he found. He lived in New York. He said, Shaun, there's this video that I found on YouTube. It's of a middle-aged black man who is asking the police to stop harassing him. And he said, Shaun, all of a sudden, a police officer comes up behind the man and begins choking him, and wrestles him to the ground and continues to choke him. I hadn't clicked on the video yet. This is my friend's description. He said, Shaun, you can hear the man yelling out, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. He said, Shaun, the guy dies right there on the sidewalk. And you have to go back in time 5 years, because in July of 2014, when I got that message, there had never been a viral video of police brutality. Many of us in this room have now seen dozens of such videos, but at that time, no such video had ever been shared. And I clicked on the link and I saw the man that we later came to know as Eric Garner. It was the first time in my life that I had ever seen, not in the movies, but in real life, seen a man who was fully alive at the beginning of that video, and yet be fully dead by the end of it. He died right there on that sidewalk. And I watched as officers, the whole video is about 11 minutes long, and people cut it up into 15-second clips. If you've never seen the whole video, officers began poking at him like he was an animal, and even thought that he was pretending as if he was asleep. They had killed him. It was literally my last day working at Global Green. That day was the day that I started trying to figure out how I could organize just my friends, just my family, my network, to try to get justice for this man. 3 weeks later, I got a text message about a teenage boy named Mike Brown who was shot and killed on a street in a town called Ferguson outside of St. Louis. And I had the thought in my mind, wow, police are out here killing people every 2 to 3 weeks. The next day we learned that a young man named John Crawford was shot and killed at a Walmart in Ohio. The day after that we learned about a young man named Ezel Ford who was shot and killed by police in Los Angeles, all of them unarmed, nonviolent. And suddenly we came to understand that police in this country weren't killing people every 2 to 3 weeks. It wasn't even every 2 to 3 days. The Washington Post and the Guardian built award-winning databases where we finally came to understand that American police were killing people 3 to 4 times a day, every single day, like clockwork, sometimes as many as 10 or 11 times a day. We began organizing all over the country, in New York, in Los Angeles, in Ohio. And then that November, a 12-year-old boy named Tamir Rice was shot and killed by police in Cleveland, Ohio. I told Linda this story on the way here, and I said something to many of these families that I have since come to regret. I would sit down in living rooms and at kitchen tables with families who had experienced this police violence, having lost their most precious loved one, their sons, their husbands, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters, their mothers. And to many of these families, closer even than we are right now, I looked many of these families in the face and said, hold on, hang in there, we're going to get justice for your family. And not a single part of me thought I was over-promising or under-delivering. I thought we would get justice for those families. And as we organized and marched and demonstrated, as we created hashtags and trending topics, marches and protests and die-ins and sit-ins, not a single one of those families, not one, in fact, nearly 1,200 people were shot and killed by police in 2014. And not a single family, 0.00%, got justice, none of them. Undeterred, I continued to tell families that same story. Hold on, hang in there, we're going to get justice for your family. I told that to the family of Philando Castile as I watched him shot and killed by police on Facebook Live. And somehow I had convinced myself that his case would be the case, where certainly his family would get justice, but he didn't. I spoke that to the family of Alton Sterling, who was shot and killed in Baton Rouge. I said that to the family of a man named Terrence Crutcher, who was shot and killed in Oklahoma. Until finally I realized that the people in power who had the authority to actually bring these families some semblance of justice, I came to understand that they truly, earnestly did not care what we said. They were not moved by our protests. They were not moved by our marches or demonstrations. It's not that we were wrong to march or demonstrate or protest. Of course we were right to do so. But I came to understand that they were not moved by our hashtags or trending topics or viral videos. They were not moved by the headlines. And so we formed an organization that would ultimately replace the people who made those decisions. Understanding that if we did not organize smarter, that we did not have the type of currency with the people that we needed to be able to move. And so I learned hitting the wall over and over and over again, organizing with protesters and demonstrators all over the country. I traveled to 45 states around the country, meeting and gathering with protesters, state by state, city by city, county by county. And I learned 4 things that we need to do to make change. As I think about us fighting back against injustice around the world, fighting back against civil rights and human rights violations, there are 4 things that we have to do to make change. I want to share those 4 things and I'll take a seat. And I hope you can duplicate them in your own way. The first thing that you need to make change is deceptive, because we often have it, and it convinces you that you're closer to change than you really are. This room has it right now. The first thing that you need to make change is you need people, and they need to be highly energized. And there's something about getting highly energized people in a room that can convince you that you are much closer to change than you really are. But having highly energized people is essential, but it's just the first step. And there are times where I have been in marches and protests and planning meetings and rooms like this and rallies where the energy of the people it can cause you to think that change is a lot nearer, a lot closer than it really is. That's because you have to have the second thing. You need people and they need to be highly energized, but you need people and they need to be deeply organized. And what I think many of us have made a mistake is that we have overestimated the value of being right and being good at the expense of also organizing ourselves. Let me push that a little bit. Have integrity, be right, be on the right side of the issue. But I need us to understand that you can be right and lose over and over and over again. And what it does is it causes many of us who believe strongly that we are on the right side of this issue. Often it causes us to think that we're destined to lose, that we will always lose. But I need us to understand that being right is not enough. It's never enough. Being energized is not enough. Here's evidence of this. In 2018, in the midterm elections, both Beto and Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum were each mentioned 300% more than their opponents on Twitter, and lost. They had the people, and the people were highly energized, but tweets are not votes. Angry face emojis are not votes. Your best intentioned Instagram post is not a vote. And I'm not saying don't click the angry face emoji, don't retweet it, don't write a well-intentioned post, but it's not a vote. We are often highly energized, but hardly organized. Right? Now, for many people, the answer is to lower our energy. I'm not saying that. I'm saying to up the quality of our organization. Here are two examples of how this group could organize, and I hope you duplicate it. And as I've started to do this, and as the teams that I'm a part of have started to do this, we have found our work to be way more effective. Here are two ways that you could organize deeply. The first is, ask yourself, who are the people that you know that could help you on this issue? Let me give you an illustration. I was organizing around a very particular law that we were trying to pass in New York. And the team that I was a part of needed to find somebody who was in a personal relationship with a particular politician. We needed a son or a daughter. We needed somebody that was close to this politician that we could meet with, that could give us a personal introduction to this person. And we searched and could not find it. 2 weeks after the deadline passed and we failed to pass this law, we learned that that politician's godson was on our email list. He just didn't know we were looking for him. Sometimes you have to ask the people in the room, in your group, on your list, who are the 5 people, who are the 10 people that you know that could help us in this? That is to say, build your network deeper. And sometimes there are people in the room who have the relationship that you need, they just didn't know that you needed it. Here's another deeper form of organization. Find the skills of the people in the room. To me, the most underused asset in all of our movements for change are the human resources and skills of the people. But what I find is, as we collect email addresses and phone numbers for people, we often don't actually ask them, what are you good at? What skill do you have? What passion do you have that you could use? I'm a part of a team now that only has about 2 staff members, but we have about 200 highly skilled part-time and full-time volunteers that make our work so much more effective just because we took the time to find the skills in the room. You need energized people. You need organized people. And here's what I see happening across the country, and Linda's right. There's a lot of good news to share about the growth of this movement, here's what I see happening. You need energized people and organized people. You need sophisticated plans that are as complex as the problem you're trying to solve. What I often find is when you are energized and organized, all of a sudden you begin moving in the right direction. But I have often seen energized, organized people confront a highly complex problem with a plan that you can write on the back of a napkin, and the size and force of that problem overwhelms the simplicity of their plan. I started asking activists and organizers around the country, not in a pandering or condescending way, I started asking them to share with me their plan. And I talk about this in my book. And I started noticing a trend right away as I asked organizers, show me your plan. I want to earnestly see it and understand it. What organizers would often do is repeat to me in beautiful, meticulous, expert-level detail the problem. And they had very subtly confused an expert-level understanding of the problem, which is great and necessary with the plan. And often because we are close to the pain, and many of you in the room feel this problem, it is your problem. When you are close to the problem, you think about it, you consider it. Your people are experiencing it. But understanding the problem is not the plan. And often we go to battle, energized and organized, with plans that will never be able to confront the problem we're up against. And I need every one of us in the room to check ourselves and ask ourselves, is our plan as sophisticated as the problem we're trying to solve? And as we begin to build out the quality of our plans with energized and organized people, we will begin to see movement. And then I'll say the last thing, unapologetically, and it's part of my role as an organizer. If you are energized, organized, and have sophisticated plans, you will see some change. But if you do not fund them, if you do not provide them with the resources that are necessary, they will not be able to grow to scale. Now, raise your hand if you're a college student in the room. So I'm sure if you opened up the bank app on your phone, there's not a whole lot of resources in there to share. But if we're not each, hear me, chipping in a little bit, if you're not budgeting change, if social change is not a part of your weekly and monthly budget, hear me. I need you to understand that there are organizations, there's a conservative organization in this country that is energized, organized, with sophisticated plans, that is very well funded. It's called the NRA. Last year was their worst year financially in 10 years. Well, hold on. And they raised $330 million on a down year. And here's what I understand. They are not an organization for change, they're an organization that blocks change. And there are many organizations right now that are aiming to block the change of the people in this room. They don't have the energy we have. They may not even have the organization we have, but their plans are often more complex, and here's where they often win. They often outfund our work, sometimes 10 to 1, 20 to 1. And I need us to understand that as we invest our energy and resources into organizing the movement to boycott, to divest, to force sanctions upon people who have human rights violations, it will amplify their effectiveness. Do you understand what I'm saying? You need to be energized, organized, with sophisticated plans. We have to find ways to fund them. Thank you so much.